Hi, Jared. Hi, everyone. So thanks, thanks for reminding me. I was on mute. So yeah, appreciate to be here today. My name is Darren Lui. I'm the Executive Director and President of Aptorum Group. Just before I dive in, just wanted to remind you of our forward-looking statements disclaimer. And to the extent if anyone's considering any investments in our company, please, I urge you to read through this disclaimer, which contains forward-looking statements in our presentation upcoming up. Just to give you a little bit of overview about the company. So Aptorum Group was actually established as early as 2010, focusing on current what we call unmet medical needs. We have quite a diversified portfolio right now, ranging from orphan diseases across to infectious diseases, including metabolic diseases, as well as women's health. Currently, out of our portfolio at the moment, we have over 15 therapeutic drug candidates under development at the moment. Our business strategy is to focus on early stage research. So our core strategy here is to focus on bringing potential drug candidates and interesting drug candidates from the discovery stage all the way into the proof of concept stage. Now, after which we have a number of options we can pursue. So some of them, for example, we can continue to develop them into the pivotal trials ourselves and eventual commercialization. Or after that, we can actually explore different kinds of collaboration models, including licensing out and co-development models as well. Our targeted key markets and regulatory pathway is firstly the US FDA first. So almost everything we do is under the US FDA regulatory pathway. Also followed very closely by the other two major markets, including the Chinese NMPA market, as well as the European EMA approvals, as well as some other major countries as well, including Australia. Our ticker is APM. We're listed on the NASDAQ Global Market in December 2018. Actually, as of last week, we're also cross-listed on the Euronext as well, also under the ticker symbol APM, to further our strategic presence over in Europe as a result. At the moment, the principal office of the company is actually based here in the UK, in London. We do have development sites across the world, one in Hong Kong, which is at the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, which is focused on what we call non-GLP work, so things like the early stage of the development pipeline, and including also formulation work and a lot of the preclinical work, including animal efficacy studies. We also have a development site over in Toronto, in Canada as well, which is focused on the latter stage of preclinical works, including GLP studies, GMP manufacturing. And as we actually shortly is just about to embark on clinical trials in North America, our Toronto site acts as a coordination hub for our clinical trials for some of our drug assets being trialed over there as well. As a company as a whole, we have just over 40 full-time staff. And also we also work with another additional 45 or so scientists, advisors, principal investigators, and consultants, depending on the particular field of expertise in relation to our drug as well. Just to maybe pick a few highlights ourselves. So our founder and also Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ian Huynh, he has over 15 years of global asset management experience. Before that, he was a graduate from Princeton University, majoring in economics, after which he joined Janus Mutual Funds and of the Janus Henderson Group as a US healthcare equity research analyst based in Denver as well. I myself, my name is Darren Lui. As I said, I have over 13 years in global capital markets experience. Previously, I studied at Imperial College, graduate first class honors in biochemistry, subsequent to which I spent most of my career with a major UK bank called Barclays Capital as well. We also have a third executive director here, Dr. Clark Chen, who's also as our CMO. He spent over 10 years working at Raffles Medical Group in both Singapore and Hong Kong. On his last post, he was the Deputy General Manager of Raffles Medical Hong Kong as well. He received his medical training in UCL in London, and also subsequent to that, he also attained an MBA degree at the University of Iowa in the United States. Our head of research, Dr. Thomas Lee, he spent most of his previous career at Novartis and Celgene. And in particular, actually at Celgene, he was part of the candidate selection committee of Celgene, and he worked on over 25 drug assets over his entire career, 5 of which have reached the market, 3 of which have actually exceeded $1 billion in sales. So he brings with him a wealth of experience in the development expertise of Celgene and Novartis. Just a quick snapshot of some of our key advisors and consultants. We announced we were joined by Dr. Kira Schirneman. Dr. Kira Schirneman is actually based over in New York. She's actually a co-founder and CEO of an existing neurodegenerative disease company called Darren Biosciences based in New Jersey. Currently, she serves as a managing director at the healthcare investment bank called H.C. Wainwright based in New York. And before that, she attained her PhD in biomedical science from Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York, and also an MBA from the Sickland School of Business as well. Just to give you a quick overview of our portfolio. As I said, we have quite a broad portfolio of assets across a number of disease areas, largely divided into, I would say, 4 key focuses. Our first focus is actually on what we call orphan diseases. So this is our SACT series. In particular, we believe that orphan diseases is a high growth area right now. There are over 7,000 or so orphan diseases identified by the US FDA and other regulatory agencies, of which actually 90% are currently still untreated or does not have effective treatment right now. So as a result of that, our first asset, which is using a repurposed drug technology to target a orphan disease called neuroblastoma. For those who don't know, neuroblastoma is actually a form of solid tumor. It's one of the most common form of solid tumor in pediatric patients, in children below 10 years old. And actually our first asset, S621 right now, is actually very close to our IND submission. We're expecting to submit our IND application towards Q4 this year in a couple of months' time, which allow us, because it's a repurposed drug, it allows us to exploit the US FDA's what we call a 505(b)(2) pathway, allowing us to go straight into what we call a phase 2A study. So it is a repurposed drug. It's based on a previously very well-studied and marketed drug that was used in the form of infectious disease that we've now found to be efficacious against solid tumors such as neuroblastoma itself. At the moment, we're actually also screening also a number of different solid tumors that we believe that it could be efficacious against as well. So at the moment, hopefully later this quarter, we'll be able to update the market on what are the potential solid tumors that SACT1 could be efficacious against as well. We also have 3 other assets right now under this development platform under SACT series, including SACT2, 3, and a project on COVID-19, also using a similar concept, using a repurposed drug approach, targeting systematically at some of these orphan diseases, as well as hard to treat diseases such as COVID-19. Our second platform is called the Aptorum series, which is exclusively focused on infectious disease. In particular, this platform adopts what we call the next generation anti-infective concept. So it is actually not an antibiotic platform. It is what we call a antivirulence-based approach towards targeting some of the very most deadly bacteria and viral diseases. So in particular, this platform, we have 4 assets under development right now, which is ALS1, 2, 3, and 4. In particular, ALS4 being the most advanced asset, and we'll talk a little bit more in the later slides, which is actually targeting the superbug called MRSA. So for those who don't know what MRSA is a form of very deadly bacteria infection. It is resistant to most antibiotics right now. It is actually the highest prioritized gram-positive bacteria that is ranked as a high priority development target by the World Health Organization right now. This particular asset, LS4, we are just about to finish off our IND enabling studies. We expect to be able to submit the IND application towards Q4 this year. Again, in a few months' time, we'll be submitting the IND application, which will allow us to commence our phase 1 trials over in Canada later this year as well. As I said, we have 3 other assets, ALS1, 2, and 3. ALS1 is targeting influenza virus A. It has a very different and more upstream drug target compared to Tamiflu and Xofluza, which are the 2 approved influenza virus drugs in the market right now. And ALS1 is actually quite unique in the sense that it's actually what we call also a first-in-class asset. Currently, we're just in the midst of lead optimization stage right now. We expect the lead optimization to be completed towards the end of the year, allowing us to start the IND enabling studies in 2021. Our ALS2 and 3 also targets what we call a much broader spectrum gram-positive bacteria, which both assets are currently in lead optimization stage right now. Again, pursuing a very new and novel concept of approach towards these bacteria. Again, they are not antibiotics as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Our third platform here is actually called the Clevis series, which is focused on metabolic diseases as well. So metabolic disease obviously is a very hot area right now, and Clevis in particular focus on microbiome-driven druggable targets for metabolic diseases. So microbiome research is now really catching up. A lot of researchers and experts in this area now believe that most of the metabolic diseases, such as obesity, fatty liver, diabetes, as well as neurodegenerative diseases, even including Parkinson's diseases, now originate from certain druggable targets within your gut microbiome system as well. So this particular platform, Clevis, focus on microbiome research. One of our leading assets right now is a macromolecule, a new macromolecule targeting our microbiome for the disease indication, including obesity. So at the moment, this particular asset is also under lead optimization stage right now. We expect to be able to complete lead optimization towards the early part of 2021, allowing us to potentially commence IND enabling studies in 2021 as well. And we have two further assets right now, SCLS2 and 3, which is still under further investigation at the discovery stage. And just to highlight some of the other earlier stage assets, we have a division focused on women's health, which is called the NLS series, Nativa series. In particular, we have two assets right now. One of them is called NLS1, which is targeting a very unmet women's health disease. It's called endometriosis, which is these very painful lesions inside the woman's uterus. It is new generation first-in-class small molecule approach towards endometriosis. And this particular drug at the moment has completed lead optimization stage. And really the next stage is to commence IND enabling studies towards the end of this year. We have a second women's health asset, which is called NLS2, Nativa's Well supplement. It is a supplement product, so it is not a drug. This particular supplement is derived from a bioactive ingredient from a naturally occurring edible plant. And as a result of that, we're able to identify in our preclinical studies that this particular bioactive ingredient is particularly efficacious against women undergoing menopause. In particular, it has the ability to improve estrogen production as well as osteoporosis as well. So this particular supplement, we are just in the midst of completing our registration requirements in Hong Kong, UK, and Europe in 2020. So we expect to be able to commercialize the supplement starting this year. And the Australia, US, and Canadian market will follow shortly next year in 2021 as well. Just to actually go through a couple of slides on our various platforms. So as I said, our Smart Eye platform, our first platform, SACT series, focus on orphan diseases. Right now, there are over 7,000 orphan diseases right now, which is actually the diseases defined as less than 200,000 patients in the US per year. And because there's such a wide range of orphan diseases, at the moment, we actually do select out of these 7,000 orphan diseases based on quite a stringent selection criteria in selecting the type of orphan diseases we prioritize for our screening purposes. So some of the criteria include, the ease of clinical trial design, the disease knowledge, how much do we know about the disease, what is the competitive landscape, of course, and the market size of that particular disease that we also take into account in selecting our screening targets. Our screening under the Smart Eye platform is in twofold. So first of all, we deploy what we call an in silico based screening or computational based screening in selecting the appropriate potential drugs, repurposed drugs that we can repurpose against the selected disease targets. So here in this case, we have over 2,600 FDA approved small molecule drug library that we do a in silico virtual high throughput screening that allowing us to narrow down a selected number of candidates to go through what we call the next stage of screening, which is the wet lab validation, including the in vitro validation, typically using cell line validation, as well as in vivo validation with using animal studies before we deploy quite a stringent IP selection process for our particular drug. So only if we can establish a very clear IP strategy, then we'll decide on bringing this candidate forward into what we call the 505(b)(2) drug repurposing pathway, and then onto subsequent clinical trial development as well. For our first asset right now, SCT1 is actually against, as I said, neuroblastoma. We selected neuroblastoma because at the moment, the 5-year survival rate for neuroblastoma is really about 40% in children. So despite the existing treatment right now, which is mostly chemotherapy, there is one monoclonal antibody treatment for neuroblastoma. However, the effective rate that we're seeing right now is really only around 40% in terms of 5-year survival rate. So it is the #1 solid tumor in children as well. And currently the estimated market back in 2017 for neuroblastoma is over $2.6 billion with a compounded annual growth rate of 3.7% at the moment as well. So it's a very interesting drug disease target for this for children as well. In some of our early stage studies, we were able to demonstrate that S621 is particularly efficacious on neuroblastoma cells, as you can visibly hear, the reduction in the neuroblastoma cells after the application of S621. And what's more importantly here is that in our subsequent study, we were able to demonstrate that S621 is particularly efficacious when it comes to synergistic with combination with chemotherapy. Now, almost all cancer patients, their first line of defense is some form of standard chemotherapy. And it's actually particularly important S621 is able to demonstrate that, because actually by able to be synergistic with some of the existing standard of care, S621 is able to exacerbate the effect of some of the standard chemotherapy applied to neuroblastoma subjects here. So as you can see, actually in yellow, we're able to demonstrate that the S621 has the effect of exacerbating the effect of some of the standard chemotherapy when we actually come to apply it in our early stages of these in neuroblastoma cell lines. So it's a very interesting asset, and actually potentially improves the market positioning of S621 when it comes to the human patients later on as well. S621, as I said, is a repurposed drug, so it actually have a very well-established safety and tolerability record. In the phase 2b studies previously for over 2 years, S621 were very safe and well tolerated. There were no adverse events at even a very high dose of 150 milligrams per day. And actually it has a FDA-approved pharmacokinetic profile with a relatively long half-life of somewhere between 43 to 55 hours as well. So it's actually an extremely safe drug. Now, moving on to our second platform right now, which is our Aptorum series for targeting on infectious disease. LS4, which is our lead program right now, is what we call an antiviral approach, is what we call a next generation anti-infective drug against Staphylococcus aureus, including MRSA infections. Unlike most of the major treatments right now, LS4 is actually an orally administered antiviral molecule using what we call the non-bactericidal approach. So actually, it actually reduces significantly the risks of developing Staph aureus resistance, which is obviously a key focus by most major regulatory authorities, including also other major pharmaceutical companies when it comes to antimicrobial resistance action globally around the world. We're targeting, as I said, IND submission in second half of this year. So in this half of this year, later in Q4. And with the phase 1 clinical trials expected to commence in Canada, in North America in H2. And we actually also target to write a request for what we call LPAD regulatory pathway, which is the US new pathway established in 2018 to potentially expedite market approval and commercialization of this asset as well. ALS1, ALS2, and 3 we have already briefly discussed before. So ALS1 is an asset against influenza A with a more upstream and different target to Tamiflu and Xofluza. ALS2 and 3 also what we call antiviral non-bactericidal approach, targeting the much more broad spectrum gram-positive bacteria as well. The ALS4 targets a market called MRSA. Now, the mortality rate at the moment for MRSA bacteremia, which is blood infection, is the most common form of MRSA infection in hospital-associated MRSA cases, with mortality rate of close to 30%. Actually, when it comes to MRSA pneumonia, the mortality rate is actually closer to 50%. For this infection as well. Now, globally, back in 2016, the estimated MRSA market is $2.9 billion. We know that right now it has well exceeded this market size due to a compounded annual growth rate of 3.2% per year. And there were a number of major deals done in 2014. Merck acquired Clevis Pharmaceutical, which is the largest developer of antibiotics, for something like $8.4 billion. And in 2018, Roivant also in-licensed one of the phase 2 ready antibiotic from Korea Intron company for something like $667 million in upfront and milestone payments as well. So there's some very interesting deals going on in these markets. Just a quickly overview. So at the moment for MRSA infections, in particular, MRSA bacteremia, which is blood infection, there's really only two FDA approved a drug right now, which is vancomycin and daptomycin. These are the only two FDA approved drugs for MRSA bacteremia after years. However, these two drugs are not ideal. It comes with there are certain side effects attached to it, such as kidney failure and so forth. In particular, both vancomycin and daptomycin have developed and observed early stage of drug resistance since 2002 and 2006 respectively as well. Vancomycin and daptomycin are both IV-based drug. So at the moment, except there's one form of oral-based administration for vancomycin, which is against a very localized gastrointestinal infection only. But these two drugs at the moment are only available in IV form. So it is actually not ideal for outpatient treatment for MRSA infected patients as well. And at the moment, other drugs, including Linsolid, which is developed by Pfizer, does have an IV and oral form. However, drug resistance has been encountered in 2010, as early as 2010. And also, Linsolid actually is not currently approved for MRSA bacteremia as well. And really just wanted to cover a little bit basis of the difference between ALS4 and some of the more common form of antibiotics right now. So ALS4 is actually what we call not bactericidal. It actually targets the pathogenicity, the toxicity of the bacteria. By removing the toxicity of the bacteria, it is able to demonstrate that actually bacteria in certain cases doesn't do any harm to the body itself, and actually allow us our own immune system, our host immune system, our white blood cells to perform the bacterial cleansing by our own body itself. So it actually targets disarming the bacteria. And as a result of that, we were able to demonstrate in our resistance studies that it actually applies much less selective pressure on the MRSA bacteria. And as a result of that, much less likely to develop drug resistance later on when it moves into human trials and human use as well. The mechanism of the Staph aureus is actually relatively well studied. So for MRSA and Staphylococcus aureus, it actually comes with a golden pigment around its cell membrane. So this actually stuff is called staphyloxanthin, and this particular golden pigment that actually stops our neutrophils, our own white blood cells, from actually cleansing and performing what we call a ROS attack on the bacteria itself. So it's able to neutralize the ROS attack and therefore rendering our white blood cells ineffective against this particular bacteria. And in our mechanism of action for ALS4 is actually to disable the golden pigment, the staphyloxanthin of the bacteria itself. It actually inhibits one of the key enzymes that synthesizes staphyloxanthin. So as a result of that, without the golden pigment, you'll see that actually the Staphylococcus aureus is subject to the ROS attack of our white blood cells, and as a result of that, resulting in bacterial cell death. And you can see visually here, as we increase the dose on the right-hand side of ALS4, you see that the bacteria will start to decolorize. As a result of that, decolorization is because of the inhibition of the formation of staphyloxanthin as well. So it's actually a completely novel approach towards targeting MRSA from an antimicrobial resistance standpoint. In our earlier stage bacteremia model, MRSA bacteremia model, in one of our lethal study model, this is injecting our rats with a very lethal dose of MRSA USA 300. You see that in the black line here, after 4 days, the bacteria, all the rats have died, so 0% survival. And actually, by adding ALS4, we were able to demonstrate more than half the mice survive on a statistically significant basis as well. So this is actually extremely important for this bacteremia model. And in our what we call a non-lethal model, non-lethal bacteremia model, we were also able to demonstrate after the addition of ALS4 a 99.5% reduction in bacterial count. Usually this is done through the kidney bacterial count, which is a standard way of counting the bacteria. We were able to demonstrate over 99% of reduction in bacterial count as a result. So extremely interesting drug and efficacious results. And as I said, we also have another asset, ALS1, which is actually targeting the influenza A nuclear protein here. And actually, we were able to demonstrate in our in vivo studies right now, able to demonstrate it outperforms Tamiflu with a very low IC50. Actually targets across many different strains of influenza A, including H1N1, H3N2 and H5N1 as well. So it's also a very promising drug and able to demonstrate it inhibits viral growth for up to 6 hours after infection as well. I just want to very quickly cover a little bit about our Clevis platform. So our Clevis platform is a microbiome-driven research development platform focusing on metabolic diseases. It is a very scalable platform right now. We have over 70 different targets right now using this microbiome approach, including obesity, diabetes, fatty liver, and cardiovascular disease, which is under our research and development as well. So potentially it's a very sustainable therapeutic pipeline using the microbiome-driven targets. The concept is actually relatively simple in a sense. So with our researchers and together with some of the third-party academic researchers have identified that the microbiome, gut microbiome actually contains a lot of metabolites. So these are chemicals secreted by the bacteria inside your gut. And it's actually these chemicals which actually drive some of these major diseases, including metabolic diseases, as well as neurodegenerative diseases, and also cardiovascular diseases as well. The CLS drug candidate is actually a form of very scalable macromolecule. So it actually targets to bind to these metabolites. It will be administered in the form as an oral form drug, which binds to these metabolites, and the complex itself together becomes too big to be absorbed into your systemic circulation. So as a result of that, it passes out through your normal digestive system, through your stool. So as a result of that, we can remove some of these what we call harmful metabolites and observe directly the effect of the particular drug as well. Now, one of our first drug is CLS1. It actually targets obesity. And obesity, as you know, is a major market right now. It's a multi-billion-dollar market around the world. In our in vivo models, by applying our CLS1 molecule targeting this particular metabolite, we were able to demonstrate that there was a significant weight loss over the course of 2 weeks after the mice was fed a high-fat diet for 30 days before we administered CLS1 into the animal. So it's actually an extremely efficacious results demonstrated in our in vivo model as well. And finally, our last, one of the assets I'd like to present to you is an LS2, which is a supplement that is very close to commercialization. It is actually developed for a very edible plant. It's called the Chinese yam. We identified a particular bioactive component of it called DOI, which we're able to demonstrate in our in vivo model a significant biosynthesis and aromatase expression in our cells. So as a result, it is able to upregulate the production of estrogen, which is actually the key issue with women undergoing menopause due to the sharp drop in estrogen, as well as able to demonstrate that it actually increases bone density, bone volume fraction, and trabecular thickness as well in our in vivo model as well. So we're targeting a dietary launch in UK, Europe, and Hong Kong markets later this year in 2020. And just to very quickly give you an overview of the company right now in terms of financials, our market cap at the moment is just over $100 million US. At the moment, as of today, we have over $15 million in terms of equity and utilizable cash resources to fund our research and development project for the next 12 months as well. And at this point, I would like to thank you very much for your time, and I would like to hand it over to any questions that you may have on the floor.
Hi, Darren. Thanks for the great presentation. Perhaps on a macro level, from a global healthcare perspective, which area that you focus on do you think is the most pressing in terms of the unmet needs?
Yeah, so maybe just on the, I'll touch on, as you said, we have a number of unmet medical needs right now, but I would say maybe at this moment, one of the hot areas is infectious disease right now. As you know, because of the COVID-19 situation from a virus standpoint, there's a major focus by pharmaceutical companies and regulatory agencies on both viral as well as bacterial infections. The antimicrobial resistant action group in Europe and in the US is also extremely active right now. There's a huge focus around antimicrobial resistance issues, so basically antibiotic resistance, which, as you know, pharmaceutical companies have kind of it took the attention of some of these antibacterial infections in the last 2 decades or so. As a result of that, there's now a renewed interest and identification basically of some of the key risk groups in bacterial infection where we just do not have that much antibiotics available right now in the market. So as a result of that, a number of major pharmaceutical companies, they've put together a AMR Action Fund, antimicrobial resistance fund right now, which is about to be launched in Q4. It's a $1 billion fund based there in Europe. And this particular one will be focused on primarily, the development of antimicrobial, so antibacterial drugs, such as, for example, companies like us, which we have our Aptorum platform that focus on antibacterial research, will be very interesting. So I would say that, right now, really there's a key focus around infectious disease coming up as a result of past events in the last 9 months, as well as upcoming focus on antimicrobial resistance research.
Right. And perhaps the last question, given that Aptorum is based in UK and also in Hong Kong, and given that there's the political issues given in Hong Kong and China, how does it affect you as a NASDAQ listed company?
Yes, so obviously with what's going on between US and China right now, we also obviously keeping a very close focus right now. I mean, at least we're glad to say that actually we do not have any of these accounting related matters issues that has been raised by some of these Chinese companies. In fact, actually our auditor is actually Markham Partners. Markham LLP is actually a US-based auditor accounting firm as well. So actually, from a PCAOB standpoint, our company is actually most of our paperwork is actually completely available for the SEC to review. So from that standpoint, actually, we have quite a diversified research base. We are, principal office here based in the UK. Our investors is also quite diversified between Asia and US and now Europe right now as a result of our recent cross-listing in Europe as of last week. So at the moment, actually, on top of that, our research development team is actually spread across mostly in North America as well as Hong Kong as well. So I would say we're actually quite well diversified from a risk standpoint. And most importantly, I think our company at the moment, because of the protocols that we follow and our location, our auditors as well, we don't actually see ourselves being impacted by some of these issues commonly encountered by some of these Chinese firms right now in the US.
All right, Darren, thank you so much for this engaging presentation. I would like to thank all the presenters today for participating in this biotech and healthcare webinar. I'm sure the viewers learned a lot through the information exchange. So do follow StockPal on your preferred social media platforms. And if you find it beneficial, do share with your friends and family as well. And join our mailing list if you haven't. So once again, thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.